Oh, I can't. There we are.
Well, today, the 19th of November, 2020. And good evening, Dan Sachs. And we're talking about protection of the weak. So I said to you that the first topic to think about in protection of the weak is that in Jewish thinking, there's protection of slaves and servants.
Yeah.
You mentioned that there are two categories of, well, I use the word slaves and servants sort of with a forward slash in between, because the word eved, which is the Hebrew word, could perhaps be translated as either. There was a dual concept and laws of slavery in Jewish thought, because towards one's own brethren within the Jewish people, there was not supposed to be any actual slavery.
Yeah.
And in very limited circumstances, you could take someone to be a long-term servant within your house, only if he was destitute and couldn't support himself in any other way, or if he had stolen, it was necessary for him to be sold in order to raise the money to pay for his having stolen. And even now, there's a strong message. There's a very almost peculiar law that's stated. This that he was a servant was only a 7-year thing.
Mm-hmm.
A bit like the Shemitah cycle. He could only be, I mean, it didn't last till the Shemitah year. It was 7 of his years, as far as I know. And he could only be a slave for 7 years. Well, that's almost the case. After 7 years, if he decided, he would be encouraged to leave after 7 years. I think there's a disagreement, technically speaking, whether, I told you there are two categories. There's one who sold himself because he was destitute, and one who sold himself because he had stolen.
Yeah.
And in the case, there's a disagreement as to in which of these cases the following applies. But the point I want to tell you is that after 7 years, generally he would go free. If he then said, "Oh, I really love it here. I love my master, my wife," because he might have given him a maidservant to marry, whom he wouldn't be able to take away with him. He said, "I really like it here. I've got children from her and so on. I'd like to stay here."
Yeah.
There was a famous saying, his ear would be pierced. Why was that? It was symbolic that the ear is the organ through which we hear. And by piercing the ear, we're saying to him, you're not really listening to what the Torah has to say.
Yeah.
The Torah has to say that people should be servants of God. That's how we live our lives. It's a noble way to live our lives in God's law, but not that people should be servants to people. And likewise, there was a protection as to what jobs you could give this Hebrew servant to do. You could not give him things which are called breaking work. What does that apply to? You tell him to do something and there's no clear end in sight. You tell him, could you just do a particular task till I come home? And you don't tell him when you're going to come home.
Yeah.
That there's a certain cruelty in that, because he doesn't know. It's like a never ending. There's a sense of when on earth is this going to end?
Yeah.
And there's another very interesting thing that you could not let's suppose you could not make him distinctly less comfortable, feel distinctly uncomfortable. If you've got one, and it leads to an amazing conclusion, if you have one bed in your house, and it's you and the Hebrew servant, you've got to give him the bed and sleep on the floor.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're allowed. Have you heard of this?
No, I haven't.
But this is very much what you wanted to hear, right?
Yeah.
This is your stuff.
Right.
So you can't have him being on the bed, and yourself on the bed and him on the floor, because that would be putting him down. So you'd have to do the opposite. You'd have to give him the bed and get yourself on the floor, or get another bed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even if he elected to stay beyond the 7 years, at the Jubilee year, which was every 50 years, he would then really go free, because the Jubilee was a concept. Maybe this is in the sense of a protection. Maybe this is itself a protection of the weak concept, because the Torah says that in the 50th year, there's a cycle of, we know we have a Shemitah cycle, 7 years.
Yeah.
And that Shemitah, it's a bit like counting the Omer between Pesach and Shavuot. You have a 7-year thing, a week, and then you have 7 of those. That makes 49. Then the 50th day is something special again on another level.
Yeah.
So in the years, there was a Jubilee year, which was a reset. And there's the concept, everything goes back to where it belongs.
Yeah.
Like I say, you're making me think that there's a certain protection of the weak concept there, because if economically a certain family or certain tribe, a certain group of families,
Yeah.
either family, let's say, slipped and became very unsuccessful and lost a lot of their property, so that the what's it called, the poverty gap, the economic,
the inequality gap,
to create a great social difference.
Yeah.
That would then that would then narrow when that would have widened over the 50 years, but then it would be reset on the 50th year, that everyone would get the land that was originally given to them when the land was divided up, when we first came into Israel, or the land of Canaan, as it was then. So that's a reimposed equality.
Yeah. So
as
for
it
that,
were.
For that specific teaching, then, that obviously after 50 years, it's reset. At what period of time did that stop necessarily taking place?
That could only, because of the technicality, that could only take place when most of the Jewish people were in Israel. So I suppose that the concept behind that is that proper Jewish life. We're no longer self-governing. We sort of have to make our communities within the non-Jewish society, but we're no longer free to set up our own society. So we learn about it, and we see that it expresses our worldview, and we perpetuate it, and we try to maintain it and keep appreciating its value, as you're doing, but we can't fully live it. We can only partially live it.
Yeah.
And so that was all the Hebrew servant, right? The Canaanite servant, as it was called, but it could be any non-Jewish nation. That didn't have the same level of protection. It wasn't that if you only have one bed, you have to give it to him or something like that. But at the same time, Maimonides emphasizes that you had to be compassionate to them, and he brings citations from the Talmud in which the sages of the Talmud were particularly compassionate towards their slaves.
Yeah.
Lest you ask, by the way, that it seems to be discriminatory. It seems to be it says, well, be nice to your Hebrew servant, but don't worry about the Canaanite. So that might have crossed your mind. That's a question you can ask in a few places in Jewish law. And I think the answer to that is, do you have siblings?
Yeah.
Let's suppose that one day a sibling of yours is in trouble financially and he needs your help. And you realize that really to help him, it's going to need quite some help. And it's not going to be easy for you. You're going to have to dig deep into your pocket.
Yeah.
You may feel that there's a moral duty because of your circumstances, his circumstances. You can manage whatever the circumstances may be. You may see, I can't just get away with the few pounds. I've got to help him in a serious way. It's because he's my brother.
Yeah.
So Jewish people, and Maimonides says this explicitly somewhere, I think in the Laws of Charity. He says that Jews are to regard themselves as brethren to one another. He said if one brother won't be compassionate on the other one, then who will? We've got to treat each other as brothers. So that you've got to be moral and ethical towards all of mankind. So you have to see your fellow Jew as a brother. So another aspect of that is you can't lend the Jew money and take interest.
Yeah.
You might ask, well, that seems ridiculous because business can't thrive without interest. The whole business world depends on it. The whole commercial world depends on it. Maybe there are ways around that something's done commercially, but I think the answer is the same. That really it's excessive. Yes, you can't really run a business world, but because it's your brother, you have to emphasize kindness more than business. And that, by the way, is another aspect of protection of the weak, the laws of interest. But not. I think that's as far as I can see, that's a bit of a summary of the the week as applies to the servitude, servants and slaves.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, back to what you just said about obviously not charging interest. You know, obviously we now know through.
Can we just one second? What I want to do here is stop the recording, because that's something about servants and slaves.